Today we begin, obviously, another week. This is our last full week before Lent, so the readings that we're looking at over the next week and a half are going to end suddenly as we get into Lent. And so we're working towards Lent. By the way, this is a really good time to start preparing what you're going to do for Lent. And one of the ways to prepare for this is look at what your distractions are, what things are distracting you, and say, well, that distraction needs to go, and start looking from that perspective. But we'll talk about that later. But in any case, we're beginning to see the story of Solomon. We're in Kings. And we're seeing that Solomon is now doing what David planned to do, and the Lord said no. And now Solomon is doing it, and that's finding a place for the Ark of the Covenant. And so we have the story of a house being built, and the Ark of the Covenant is put into the house. Now, interesting thing to understand, what was in the Ark of the Covenant? Inside the Ark of the Covenant was nothing more than the Ten Commandments. The actual Ten Commandments, the ones that Moses received the second time. I don't know if you know, Moses received the Ten Commandments twice. Have you ever seen the movie, The Ten Commandments? And you see where Moses gets all upset and throws down the Ten Commandments, and there's great reaction. That's not exactly accurate to the Bible exactly. The whole incident that you see actually happens much later in the actual story, but you see what happens. In any case, the Ten Commandments, that part, they're destroyed. So he needs a new set. So that is actually the second set of the Ten Commandments. That's true, and that's biblically accurate. That's what's happened. So here we are looking at the Ten Commandments, the second set, that is been in the ark. That's the set that was put into the ark, and it's in the Ark of the Covenant. And from that point on, that second set of commandments, that first set put into the tabernacle, turns the Ark of the Covenant, also known as tabernacle, as the presence of God. And there are stories in there that reflect that anyone who didn't understand that would see something that would indicate, you got to realize there's someone who touched the ark in the wrong way as it started to fall off, and he touched it and he died immediately. And they're like, okay, why did that happen? And you're looking, but the message was clear. You're looking at something more than a simple gold box. You're looking at the presence of the Lord. Why is that important for us Catholics? Because that's the outgrowth. In other words, the evolution, in a sense, if you will. I love that term, if you will. An evolution, if you will, of that reality of the Ark of the Covenant becomes the tabernacle that we have in all Catholic churches. And what was in the Ark of the Covenant in the Old Testament? The Ten Commandments. What is in the tabernacles? The body and blood of Christ. What is the body and blood of Christ? The body and blood of Christ is the affirmation, is the sign isn't the right word. I'm trying to, the word, I just can't think of the right word, is the new covenant. So maybe I'll just drop the word altogether. It is the new covenant. The new covenant is through the death and resurrection of Jesus. So what was the sign of the old covenant in an external way? There was one of the signs was, of course, circumcision. What was the sign when we had Moses? The Ten Commandments. What is the sign of the new covenant today? The body and blood of Christ, which we have in our tabernacles. So this is a powerful predecessor to what we see in our churches today. And this is why it's so important. Now, one of the things people will say, it's fascinating. People talk, back in the day, people knew their faith. Did they? Did they actually? It's our role to really come to understand what our faith teaches And when we understand what our faith teaches, one of the first things it teaches is to have a relationship with Christ. So one of our first understandings is develop a relationship with Christ. And to have that, that's the center of everything we do, right? How many people who learned the basics of their faith from their Baltimore catechism would walk into they'd walk into a church and they'd genuflect before they walk into a pew and have no idea why they were doing that? How do I know? Because if they were going to a movie theater, they would genuflect before they'd walk into their seat in the row where their seat was in a movie theater. And they didn't, and the reason why they do that is they didn't understand why they genuflected when you went into church. And why do you genuflect when you go into church? You genuflect not to anything else but the Lord who is in the tabernacle, who back then was in the center of the church behind the altar. Now, a lot of people complain, well, today it's in different places. Yeah, that's right. And the reason is because the altar is the focus of this sacrifice of the Lord, which is not reenacted. It is the actual sacrifice. So the altar, so it's to make your focus on the altar, but to understand the presence of Christ is in the tabernacle. That's why it's not directly always behind the altar. It can be, but that's one of the reasons. And so, for example, when I do Mass at the convent here, I come out of the side and I will genuflect to the tabernacle, which is to the right as I'm looking at the altar, to the right of the altar. Why? Because I am genuflecting to the Lord. And then I continue on and I reverence the altar and all, because now the focus will be away from the tabernacle and towards Christ in the sacrifice. So this all begins starting today with the reading of today. Do you understand? This is when we see the Ark of the Covenant, which we understand has been around for some time. Remember, it existed during the time of the Judges. It existed during the time of David. Now it's in Solomon. But Solomon, for the first one, is building a house and to house this tabernacle, which the Ark of the Covenant, which, remember, David said he wanted to do, and the Lord said, no, this is not the time to do that. Solomon is now doing that. Now you have this special place, and this is the predecessor for the tabernacle in the church. Now you know what that's from. So when you look at the tabernacle, when you go into church, you can see that, yes, the body and blood is there. Now, by the way, there is a candle there, which also goes all the way back to the time of way back to before the time of David, the candle. So there's a candle there. It doesn't have to be, but usually in a red, red candle cover. That doesn't hold the candle itself. The candle is held by another vessel inside, and it's usually an 8-day candle. But this little candle, I don't know what you call it, the red thing, is just there to hold the candle, and also that it reflects the light of Christ, holding that thing, and you can see it through a red filter. It doesn't have to be red, and that is called the vigil light. That's the vigil candle, because in a sense, it's giving vigil to the presence of Christ in the tabernacle, and that vigil light is always on while you have Eucharist in the tabernacle. If you don't, the candlelight should be off and the tabernacle should be open. If you do, the candlelight should be on, and so that's one of the things that we have. So this is the predecessor of that. We now have a place for the Ark of the Covenant. And so when you walk into a church and you see the tabernacle, you know the history behind it. It starts with the 10 Commandments. And again, there's something we have to understand there. Because if you opened up the Ark of the Covenant, what would you see? You'd see the Ten Commandments. You'd see the stone tablets of Ten Commandments. You might, and first of all, it wouldn't be open up, but you might see. Now, why do I say that? Do you remember Raiders of the Lost Ark? If you haven't seen Raiders of the Lost Ark, please go see it. It's one of the classic movies of all time. And it really gives you this very powerful understanding of a false belief, and that's part of the story. It's not that this is it's obviously a fiction story, but it's not that this is perpetuating the false belief. It's not. False belief that whoever owned the Ark of the Covenant would win the war. And you just go see it if you haven't seen it. Maybe if you haven't seen it in a while, go see it. But one of the things that you recognize is what's in the Ark of the Covenant. Well, I'm not giving too much away. Dust. Because they were stone tablets. What's going to happen to them after they're going to turn to dust? Dust. Okay. And the rest of the story you will see. But what is in the what's in the tabernacle? Well, if you opened up the tabernacle, just if you open up the Ark of the Covenant, you say, "Oh, this is just dust," right? If you open up the tabernacle, you go, "Oh, this is just bread." But what is it? It's the body and blood of Christ. What was in the tabernacle? What was in the Ark of the Covenant? What was important about the Ark of the Covenant? The Ark of the Covenant was the Ten Commandments. What's the Ten Commandments? The wisdom of God. Do you understand? And who is God? God is wisdom. He's not just the source of wisdom. He is wisdom. You can say, well, there's a source of wisdom around here. It's called Harvard University or Boston College or for communications, Emerson College or Boston University or, yeah, okay. Those are places where you can learn human wisdom, but the very source, the very reality, the very embodiment is the right word, but the very nature of wisdom is God. And so what you had is the Ten Commandments are the wisdom of God. So that's God's presence. Now you have the body and blood of Christ in the tabernacle. But it's that same dynamic now for a New Testament. What's New Testament time, that's what's in the tabernacle in all the churches, but in the ancient days, in the Old Testament times, that is the Ark of the Covenant, the wisdom of God. Where is the Ark of the Covenant today? Well, if you believe Raiders of the Lost Ark, you'll know that it's in storage. But it's obviously a fiction story. Nobody knows. It is unknown. And that's a powerful reality when you understand that. And there's a lot of dynamics there. Why? Because we have a new Ark of the Covenant. And what is the new Ark of the Covenant? It is the tabernacle in all the Catholic and also the Orthodox churches. I think the Orthodox have tabernacles, the Catholic and the Orthodox churches, because you do realize the lineage of the Catholics and the Orthodox goes back to the apostles. So when we say, well, who founded the Roman Catholic Church? Jesus Christ. Who founded the Orthodox Church? Jesus Christ. The lineage is the same, goes all the way back. But you had this excommunication of the two churches. And it was a mutual excommunication. So if you say, the Catholics excommunicated the Orthodox might say, oh no, the Orthodox excommunicated the Catholics, because it was a mutual excommunication in 1054 AD. But the lineage is all accurate. The sacraments that you find in the Orthodox Church are just as valid as the sacraments you find in the Catholic Church. One of the differences is that many people in the Orthodox Church do not want the Catholics to receive in their church. I'm not saying it's the Santa, you better not show up. It's just, no, it's different. So, but the lineage is the same. The lineage is all the same. And so you understand this is the valid sacrifice that you will find of the body and blood of Christ in the tabernacle, originating from this reading today, when we see the Ark of the Covenant put into the house that is built for it, this majestic house, which becomes the temple, and there we see it placed in there. And that's the history of when you walk into the church and you see the tabernacle, and why you always see the tabernacle in every single Catholic church. And if you don't see it right away, it's there someplace. But that's the reason. We're going to be back on the other side of the break. You're listening to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. We'll be right back. Did you know that the Catholic Audio Media Podcast is available on various podcast platforms? You can find us, among others, on Podbean, which is our home platform. You can find it on Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeart, among others. Just look for Catholic Audio Media, all one word. On some platforms, such as Spotify, look for Catholic Audio Media, 3 words, and subscribe and listen to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon, patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media, patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer, previews of upcoming podcasts, previews of upcoming columns over at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com, your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out, patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. We're back. And so, as I said, we're looking at the week and a half before Lent. So, as I said, this is a good time to prepare your Lent. As you know, as I preach every year, and I learn from I preach it every year, and I learned from the priest in the first parish I attended when I returned to the church: do not give up candy for Lent. I'll talk more about that as we go along. But do not give up candy. Remember I told you that story? Well, I'm going to tell you again. I tell it every year. But we'll get back to that. So now is the time to look at, and what are you going to give up? Now, there are 3 things you need to do. Well, wait a minute. I got to be careful, because you realize people are built up, well, this is the way you have to do it. And no, you don't. But these are the three things that are suggested. To give something up, that's called mortification. So you're sacrificing something. Now, I'll talk about that as we go along. Mortification. But I'm going to suggest you do something extra in your prayer, or you build your prayer in a different way. So that's the second thing. It could be Bible study. It could be whatever. Okay. And the third thing is alms. So we're called to give alms. Now, look, if you're already giving alms on a regular basis, don't worry about giving alms, because you're already doing it. You're doing it, all year round. So that's not necessary. But if you're not giving alms, this is the time to give alms. This is, and it's important. Why? Because one of the teachings of the church, as a matter of fact, you heard it this weekend as the first reading, this past weekend, one of the teachings of the church is you have to take care of the poor. And remember, that's one of the things that Jesus says. What is the standard? Let me put it this way. All people say, there's this mortal sin. If you commit a mortal sin, you're going to up in hell. And all these other people are always ready to cast into hell. What did Jesus say would cast you into hell? When I was hungry, you gave me no food. When I was thirsty, you gave me no drink. When I was sick and in prison, and you never came to visit me. When I was sick, you didn't come for me. When I was in prison, you didn't come to visit me. Et cetera, et cetera. He specifically says that is going to lead people to hell. Now, wait a minute. If you listen carefully to what is being said in that reading, the people say, well, when did we see you? Why would they say that? Because they were doing everything else they were supposed to be doing, but they weren't doing that. Okay, so now we understand that reality. You do know that, well, maybe you don't know, so I'm just coming out with that. If you're not helping the poor, now, understand within context, within reason, in the Old Testament, that's called an abomination. And so Jesus makes it clear that if you're not helping those who are poor, that's an abomination. And helping those who are poor does not mean necessarily saying, hey, government, you've got to help the poor. That's your job. There you go. I just made that statement to my representative. Therefore, I'm helping the poor. No, that's not what it says. It says you. Now, how do you help the poor? Now, obviously, St. John Vianney put it really well. You help the poor with your surplus. Okay, that and what was it? St. Augustine said, if you have clothes that you no longer use, they belong to the poor. So there's this understanding that we give to the poor what maybe we don't need. That's an important understanding. So that calls for two things that are possible. One is to live a more simpler life, and the other is to live in such a way that you're helping the poor. Well, that's one of the things you can think of with Lent. So consider that, helping the poor. Now, you can do it in all kinds of ways, and that's an important consideration. But what we're called to do is to help the poor. And when we help the poor, we're doing what the Lord asks us to do. So that's part of the almsgiving. That's an essential part. So we want to do three things. We want to come up with something for our prayer. We want to help the poor. And again, if you're already doing that, then don't worry about it. Say, well, now I have to do something else. No, you don't. You're already helping the poor. But now the third thing you need to do is that you've done prayer, you've done almsgiving, and maybe do something, and then you want to give something up. So maybe, and like I said at the beginning of the program, look for distractions that you're finding. Like, for example, one of the things I'm looking at is I have a tendency when I come home from the hospitals is I sit down and I'll watch YouTube. So now I'm saying, well, that's taking me away from doing other things, so maybe I should not watch YouTube, right? So you don't necessarily have to give up something that's special to you. I'm going to give up something really special. Why? It's special to you. Don't necessarily give it up unless it's going to help you draw closer to Christ. Now, I can find that my watching YouTube, as much as I do, it's not that I watch tons of it, but I watch maybe more than I should. Because you know what? I'll tell you. You know what? Those little shorts on YouTube? I guess they are the YouTube's incorporation of Vine. Well, on my set here, if I hit the down button on my control, the next one comes up, and then the next one. And you could be there for hours just going by, 30 seconds a piece or a minute a piece or whatever. And that's what I say, no, I got to stop doing that. Not that I'm there for hours, but, I'm saying, well, this is cool. Oh, this is cool. And so that's a distraction. So that's one of the things to do. But put all those three things together. Now, the Brazilian bishops are some of the most fascinating, one of the most fascinating bishop conferences in the world. Yes, I'm saying that specifically. Yes, I am bringing that up specifically for those of you in the United States. So if you want to see a great example of a great bishops' conference, look to the Brazilian bishops. In any case, you look at that, and they always during this time, they always bring out this, what they call it, fraternidade, which obviously means fraternity. And it's this idea of helping the poor. Well, one of the poster they have is so wonderful. It's this poster of a man sleeping on a park bench. He's covered in a blanket, and it reflects on the fact that this is Jesus, and that's how we're called to look at the homeless. So what you have is this. Now, well, let me finish my thought. I keep doing that, don't I? I interrupt myself all the time. So what you have is this bench. It's a park bench, and you've got this man, as I said, wrapped up into a blanket, or person, because you can't see the face. and living on the park bench. And it says, Ele meo morar entre nos. He came to live among us. João 1:14. John 1:14. He came to live among us. And it's showing, and it's so powerful an image. This is why I really appreciate the Brazilian bishops. It says it's so powerful because here it is showing this image of what Jesus actually says. And so he said, we understand that when you see someone who is living on the street, that's important for you to realize that person represents Christ. That's something that Dorothy Day used to teach all the time, and Peter Morin. It's so powerful, but there's something else there that's important to understand. And that is when we look at that and we recognize that and we see that powerful image, we realize that that's where the Lord is calling us to look at these people as our brothers and sisters in Christ. We're called to do that. It's almost like this is Christ coming, almost like undercover CEO. And it's such a powerful image, which I highly recommend. I'm trying to figure out. I'll have a link to it. I'll have a link to it on the podcast here. If it'll be in the. Usually, you notice I don't have any description, so I'll make sure there's a description. And you'll see the link to it. And so it's so powerful an image, and that's what we're called to recognize. And how do we help those people? We help them with our surplus, not out of our need, but it's our surplus in order to help them. We're going to talk more on the other side of the break. You're listening to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. We'll be right back. You can now leave a message for us, which we can air and discuss on this program. Just call 617-297-7452. That's 617-297-7452. 617-297-7452. Feel free to call, leave a comment, a question, or even feedback, and we may play it on the air. I can discuss your comment or question as well, so give that a try. 617-297-7452, 617-297-7452. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon, patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media, patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer, previews of upcoming podcasts, previews of upcoming columns over at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com, your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out, patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. We're back. So we're going to continue with this last full week before Lent. And that's obviously we're going to be looking at more of Solomon. Of course, focus is going to be on Solomon during this time. Solomon, you got to remember, is the third king of Israel. And who was the greatest king? The second. So we're going to go to Solomon, and we're going to see indeed this powerful, kind of like a dedication ceremony we're going to see tomorrow. So that's coming up tomorrow. We're going to be looking at 1 Kings 8, the second part of 1 Kings 8, and we're going to kind of look at all that and ask the question, how is that going to impact our view of God? That's one of the reasons why it's there. So we're going to see that coming up tomorrow. In the meantime, remember that if you can, see that link to the let me look it up. Campagna de Fraternidade, with that powerful image. And we realize that, there are many homeless that live in Brazil and Sao Paulo and everything. And one of the things they bring up is, granted, they don't have to deal with the snow, but the rains are intense, and these people are living out in the rains. So these are things for us to think about. Again, thank you to the Brazilian bishops who do this wonderful job. We'll be back tomorrow. Have yourself a blessed day. The Catholic teaching in this podcast is reflected and presented as accurately as possible. The opinions expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Archdiocese of Boston or any other institution.